Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Johanna Chan. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. Carrie Lam announces review of social distancing measures as health experts chart exit strategy for Hong Kong. Unemployment rate jumps to highest level in a year as businesses take a beating amid fifth COVID wave. And in Ukraine, Russian forces attack a theater with hundreds of civilians taking shelter inside. With the fifth COVID wave seemingly past its peak, leading health advisor Yuen Kwok-yong and fellow experts have charted an exit strategy for Hong Kong. They believe things can return to normal by summer, but there are strings attached.
It could be months before the fifth COVID wave recedes, but three renowned microbiologists are already charting an exit strategy for Hong Kong. In an article published on Mingpao newspaper, Yuen Kwok-yong, David Leung, and Siddharth Sridhar from Hong Kong University suggested social distancing measures may be gradually lifted from July. But it comes with a string of conditions, one of which being the vaccination rate reaching 95%. Before that, authorities must implement mitigation measures. With possibly hundreds of thousands of people already infected, the experts believe there is no point sending more patients with mild symptoms to isolation facilities. The only exceptions are when they live with high-risk family members, such as the elderly, children, or those chronically ill. Close contacts, meanwhile, can return to work once they test negative through RAT, instead of completing at least 7 days of quarantine. This would alleviate the manpower crunch for essential industries. International flights should also resume as soon as possible, as imported cases are now a drop in the ocean considering the local caseload, which is edging towards 1 million. Hong Kongers returning from overseas can undergo home quarantine to ensure adequate hotel rooms for foreign arrivals. Even if there is a sixth wave in the future, the city will be much better equipped, and there is no need to go back to restrictive measures, they added.
Setting a vaccination target of 95% would simply leave the government's hands tied, according to the chief executive. Carrie Lam said the target would take a long time to reach, while other health experts feel other indicators would be more helpful. Maisie Mock reports.
While Yuen Kwok-yong proposed setting a target vaccination rate of 95% for the city to resume social and economic activities, Carrie Lam had reservations. With just over 8,000 people getting their first jabs yesterday, I'm afraid that would take a long time, she said. Lam added setting a threshold would leave the government's hands tied and create more panic in society. While the city is already 91% vaccinated, she warned the last mile was often the hardest, as there are people who hold a strong opinion against the jabs. Responding to HKIBC's request for comment, other medical experts agree that a high vaccination rate should not be the sole benchmark, if at all, to relax social distancing measures. Respiratory disease expert Leung Chi-Chiu urged authorities to instead gauge the state of the healthcare system and the economy, arguing the highly transmissible Omicron variant was likely to offer immunity faster than vaccines. Epidemiologist Ben Cowling said any relaxation of measures should be based on the level of immunity attained by the population and the transmissibility of the virus. He suggested the government consider gradually relaxing measures from early April. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
A midterm review will now be conducted to see if there is room to relax Hong Kong's social distancing measures. The chief executive said she made the decision after feeling that people's tolerance is wearing thin. Johanna reports.
Just 1 day after saying it was not the time to relax, the chief executive suddenly announced a midterm review on social distancing measures, which have been in place since last month.
The reason why I think the time has come is not because of the number of cases have come down significantly. They are actually now at the high-level plateau in public health terms. But I have a very strong feeling that people's tolerance are fading. I have a very good feel that some of our financial institutions are losing patience about this sort of isolated status of Hong Kong, and Hong Kong is an international financial center.
A decision will now be made by next Monday at the latest on whether the curbs, including flight bans and school suspensions, will continue until April the 20th as scheduled. Lam also confirmed she will update the public on a long-awaited compulsory universal testing exercise, but dismissed rumors that it will start on the 26th of this month. On a separate note, the city's leader denied a lack of manpower was to blame for the deaths of 3 elderly patients at Asia World Expo earlier this week. She pledged to ramp up support for the vulnerable group with medical resources and oral medication. Johanna Ho, HKIBC.
Hong Kong's unemployment rate has deteriorated for the first time in a year. The jobless rate for February stood at 4.5%, up from 3.9% in January. This means 22,700 people went out of a job last month. The underemployment rate also worsened from 1.8% to 2.3%. Retail, accommodation, and catering sectors were the worst hit from the social distancing measures triggered by the 5th COVID wave. For the first time since last month, daily COVID infections returned to the low 20,000 level. But deaths remain in triple digits, and they include a 49-year-old woman with no underlying conditions.
Hong Kong's daily caseload took a dip today, logging 21,650 cases, the lowest uptick in 19 days. Most of the cases came from self-reported tests on the RAT platform, while over 8,600 were from PCR tests. The city's death toll is edging closer to 5,000 after another 289 fatalities, including a backlog of 87. Most of the younger deaths had chronic illnesses, except for a 49-year-old woman. She had no underlying medical conditions and had received her second Sinovac jab in August. She suffered respiratory failure on Monday and was rushed to United Christian Hospital. X-ray scans revealed lung damage, and she passed away yesterday. The case has been passed to the coroner. Meanwhile, the hospital authority will now make it easier to secure appointments at designated clinics, following complaints that the hotline often takes a long time to get through. Starting tomorrow, reservations can also be made via the HA Go app.
Over to the war in Ukraine. A theater sheltering hundreds of civilians in the beleaguered city of Mariupol was allegedly hit by Russian forces, with authorities still trying to ascertain the casualties. President Volodymyr Zelensky once again pleaded with Western countries to do more to stop the war. Sarah Wong reports.
The scale of the devastation in Mariupol after relenting Russian bombardment is painful to measure. Once a vibrant port by the Sea of Azov, the city is now an inferno with little food, water, or a way out. Hundreds of people who have sought refuge in the theater are feared dead or wounded after Russian airstrikes reduced the building and other parts of the city into rubble. Hospital workers are struggling to cope with an ever-growing number of patients as planned humanitarian corridors repeatedly collapsed. This father burst into tears after his 16-year-old son succumbed to injuries when a bomb exploded on the football pitch. Over in capital Kyiv, remnants of a downed Russian missile hit a residential building, killing at least one person. The damage was visible from the outside, while firefighters raced against time to evacuate residents. Amid the desperation, many Ukrainians refuse to cave in to Russian aggression. In the second largest city of Kharkiv, people were out in force trying to rebuild a primary school, which crumbled under Russian fire. A defiant Ukrainian leader went on another Trump offensive with a speech at the U.S. Congress. Volodymyr Zelensky invoked the memories of Pearl Harbor and the 9/11 attacks and appealed directly to President Joe Biden in English.
You are the leader of the nation, of your great nation. I wish you to be the leader of the world. Being the leader of the world means to be the leader of peace.
Washington is sending $1 billion worth of weapons to Ukraine, while still withholding direct military intervention to avoid a larger conflict. But for 44 million Ukrainians, 3 million of whom have fled, the suffering in and out of the battleground is a price they are already paying. Sarah Wong, HKIBC.
At least 4 people have died and over 100 were injured after a 7.4 magnitude earthquake hit Japan's northeastern coast. The earthquake sent houses rattling at around 11:30 last night. There were also reports of a small tsunami, but a low-risk advisory was lifted by this morning. Around 2 million homes across the country were left without power, including about 700,000 in the capital, Tokyo. In 2011, the same region was devastated by a magnitude 9 earthquake. That triggered a deadly tsunami and caused the meltdown of the Fukushima nuclear power plant. The U.S. Federal Reserve announced its first rate hike in more than 3 years and has indicated that more may be on the way. The central bank chair also made it clear inflation would remain high for some time. Winnie Wong reports.
In a vote of 8-1, policymakers in the United States lifted the nation's rates by 0.25 percentage points. It's the first rate hike from the Fed since 2018, with the chairman explaining that this was necessary to curb the U.S.'s worst inflation in decades. He also signaled more could be on their way in the central bank's upcoming 6 meetings this year, but assured it will not tip the economy into recession.
The economy is very strong, and against the backdrop of an extremely tight labor market and high inflation, the committee anticipates that ongoing increases in the target range for the federal funds rate will be appropriate. In addition, we expect to begin reducing the size of our balance sheet at a coming meeting. As we emphasize in our policy statement, with appropriate firming in the stance of monetary policy, we expect inflation to return to 2% while the labor market remains strong. That said, inflation is likely to take longer to return to our price stability goal than previously expected.
In fact, according to the Fed's quarterly projections released yesterday, the year 2022 will wrap up with an inflation of 4.3%. Policymakers do not expect it to return to their goal of near 2% until 2024. Winnie Wong, HKIBC.
Now let's take a look at the markets. The Hang Seng made major gains for the second straight day, picking up 7% or more than 1,400 points. To the top 10 active stocks, Tencent up $23, Meituan up $17.20, Alibaba up $11.30. JD.com up $34.80, Hong Kong Exchange up $22.20, and Wuxi Bio up $9.35. To the forex trading against the Hong Kong dollar, the euro is at 8.64, British pound at 10.25, and Australian dollar at 5.73. Over in the UK market, the FTSE 100 is up 27 points. On to the weather now. Sunny intervals tomorrow with fog near coastal areas in the morning. Temperatures will range between 22 and 28 degrees. The weekend will start off with similar conditions before clouds set in on Sunday. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Thursday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Johanna Chan. Thanks for watching. Good night.